going to talk about intervals today. And the reason I decided to start with intervals is that it's the most important thing if you want to understand anything else. Basically, without intervals, you're not going to be able to understand how scales work, how scales relate to chords, how all that stuff is just not going to make much sense if you don't know intervals. It's kind of like being able to write without learning how to draw the letters of the alphabet. So that's what we're doing today. Remember that you can download the full intervals lesson that came with your ticket. So just log into guitarplayback.com. There's a lesson on intervals. We're going to follow pretty much the lesson, get more in depth. Intervals are the distance between two notes. So that means that an interval involves two notes all the time. It's not a single note. You have to have two notes to have an interval. So there's your reference note, from which we're going to measure the distance with the other note. And the distance between these two notes, that's what the interval is. You can measure the distance between two notes from anywhere on the fretboard, right? So the reference note can be here, here, here. It really doesn't matter. It can be anywhere. And the reference note is called the root. So the root, think of a tree, you know, the tree takes its roots in the ground, and when you measure the height of a tree, you measure it from the ground, from the roots, if you want. So that's an easy way to remember it. So in order to have an interval, you always need to have a root. The root is always involved, right? No matter what. Music without intervals is just soundscapes. So if I play a note by itself, you know, you might like the sound of it. You might think, yeah, I love it because it's a guitar, I love the way it sounds, the way it resonates. But it doesn't really talk to you. In order for that note to have significance, it needs to be played in reference to something else. Whether that something else is played at the same time, same note here, but it has a different meaning because of the other notes that I'm playing with it. Or that note can get a meaning because it's played in relation to another note that is just before or after, like a melody. So that's why we need to determine what intervals are. As I said, an interval can be played anywhere, on any string, any fret. And we're going to start with intervals that are played on the 6th string, the low E string if you're tuned in standard tuning. In Western music, which we're talking about today, we deal with half steps, and a half step is the smallest interval that you find on the guitar. If we take a root, which is our reference note from which we're going to start measuring everything, let's say that this is here's our root, okay? We have a root here. This is our root, okay? It's just, it's a dot. That's our root. And so we can add a second note right after the root. So the distance between this and this is a small distance. That's a small interval. And we can add another note after. And if we measure this time the distance between this note and this one, that's a little bit larger, a little bit bigger, right? And you can keep going like that, adding some notes one after the other. Each note that I'm adding is going to be a wider and wider interval. We'll call this R for the root. And then we have a second note, a third, a fourth, and so forth. And what we find is that if I keep adding notes here, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9, 10, 11. The 12th note right here is the same note as the first one. What can we notice? We can notice that it looks kind of like a smiley face, but we can also notice that the first note and the 12th note, they're the same exact notes, and in between we have a bunch of other notes. Okay, let's grab our guitars now. Okay, remember here on the board, I had a root, which can be anywhere on the fretboard, and then we can add notes right after that root, and the more notes we add, the wider the interval. If I play my first string open, the open string, I can add a second note 1 fret higher, and that's the smallest interval that we have, from fret 0 to fret 1. That's the smallest interval, and that corresponds to this on the fretboard. I'm playing my open string here, right there, and then if I play the first fret, that corresponds to this note right here, the second one. That's the smallest interval that we have. Now what if I played this and then this? So I'm skipping a note, so I'll play my open string, and then the second fret, that's what I just played. The interval, this interval is a little bit wider than that one. And if you play open string, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the 12th fret in relation to the first open string, so if you play 0, 12, on the diagram, it corresponds to playing this and that. This and that. And there were 12 in between. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You keep stacking notes on top of the root, and then eventually you get to a note that has the same name as the root. It's just played higher. Once you reach the note that has the same name, that's called the octave. The octave comes from the word octa, 8, an octagon, 8-side shape. Octopus, 8 tentacles, maybe, I don't know. So the octave has 8 in it, and this is a problem for us, because according to our board that we just saw here, there's 12 notes, but why would the second big black dot would have an 8 in it, like octave, octa, why not 8? We're going to talk about the actual names of the notes. In order to name the notes, we had to decide to come up with a system, and the system is going to be taking the alphabet. A would be a note. B, C, D, E, F, G. And remember, the octave, 8. We reached 7 there. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 7. 8, octave. That means that after A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we go back to the octave. A. First 7 letters of the alphabet are going to be notes. If this is an A, that's our root, and that's A, okay? Hopefully you guys can see this. That's an A. And then we have a bunch of notes, like we saw from the open string all the way to the 12th fret. There's a bunch of notes all the way up to the octave, and the octave is going to be A also. So these two notes are the same. These two notes are the same. I'm going to put this A a little bit bigger so you can really see it. So now that we know this, there's a problem. Because if this is the root, and this is the octave, 8, but we have 12 notes between the open string and the 12th fret, that means that we need to fit 7 notes in between. 7 because A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 7 notes that we need to place on 12 dots. How are we going to do that? So I would recommend, we're talking about intervals, and intervals can be made of any notes, really. You can, in other words, the roots, we had our root with A, but that's just an example, because the root can be B also. B can become the root. And so there's a lot of different possibilities for the root. That being said, since we're talking about intervals, the root is the reference note. And if we want to measure the distance between a root which is A and B, that interval is going to be called the second. A, B, that's the second. Between A and C, that would be 1, 2, 3. That's a third. What about between A and E? What would that be? To see if people are following. The distance between this and this. A fifth? Yeah, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exactly. So we haven't really talked about minor, major, diminished, or anything like that yet, because we don't really care about that so far. We're only caring about the problem that we have. Between a root and its octave, there's 12 notes on the fretboard, and over these 12 notes, we need to fit 7 types of intervals. The second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh. And then you have the octave. I started with the sixth string, and I just used everything on the sixth string. But when you're playing, you don't really do that. If you're limited to just one string, you can really improvise freely on the fretboard. You know, all your leads would probably sound like stuff like that, you know, and you'd turn into, I don't know, whatever. I won't go there because I don't know where to go. But you want to kind of condense your notes on the same area of the fretboard when you improvise. You don't want to just do long phrases, because some of the notes are going to be very unreachable. So you want to play more vertically than horizontally. We are dealing with notes on the sixth string. So let's consider, for example, a root right here. Now again, I said that roots can be anywhere on the fretboard, right? So a root could be on the 5th fret like it is now, but I could also have a root right here if I wanted to. But we'll just start with the root right here. If I were to play just on the 6th string, then the octave of that note would be found 12 frets above. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm running out of space here on my fretboard, but it will be all the way up towards the right, and I would have my octave. And in between I'd have the second, the third, and so forth. But that's horizontal playing. We don't want that. We want vertical playing. So the octave of that note is going to be found right there. Special effects. So it's found on a different string, different fret, but that particular shape needs to be remembered. And remember, we are only dealing with roots found on the 6th string right now. We're not dealing about the others. We'll do that after. If we were to play this on our guitar, we've got our root on the 6th string, 5th fret, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the octave is found right there. And so basically we are skipping a string. If you look at the diagram again, we're skipping a string. So we started on the 6th string, skip the 5th to the 4th, and 2 frets higher. Alright, let's consider our root here on the 6th string, 2nd fret. Where would be the octave? Which string and which fret for the octave, if this is our root? Yeah, exactly. Great. I love these diagrams because I can eat, snack, drink coffee, and nobody would ever see me. How to play an octave? We know that octa is 8, right? And if we go back to our diagram on the screen here, we have 7 letters to place on that diagram. There is a very important diagram that you just need to remember. And if you've played for a little while, you're most likely comfortable with that diagram. Let's consider our root on, again, the 6th string, 5th fret, because it's right in the middle of the fretboard. So we've got a root and its octave. We know where that is now. And this shape is super important. So it looks like a major scale. It is a major scale, but that's not the point. The point is that this diagram has all the important notes in it. If this note that I'm going to highlight in a second is a root, then you can see all the other notes. Root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and then the R again is called the R for the root, but it's really the octave. If we forget about the letters, because the letters are going to change depending on the root, you know, the root can be any note, but if we change these to this, the root is the reference point, and then we have the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and then the octave right here, which is 8, or the root again, it doesn't matter. It's the same. And the diagram on our guitar of that corresponds to this. But let's say that we want to find the major seventh of a note that is found on the 6th string, 5th fret. The 7th is found right there. And it's the distance between these two notes that makes a 7th. And you can see that 7th in relation to the other notes, because eventually you want to just memorize that diagram and be able to go right away to the corresponding interval. Now let's say that we wanted to find the perfect fourth. Well, the perfect fourth would be right here. So if this is our root right here, and we want to find the 7th from that root, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so the 7th of that root would be that note. The problem is that if we have this kind of shape, there are some notes that are not covered. Like, for example, this note right here, that is between the root and the second, it's still a note, right? The distance between this note and that one needs to be named. So the notes that are found in between, the notes that are not covered, we're going to cover them with subcategories. So the second, the third, the fourth, all those intervals have subcategories. And these subcategories are going to be called minor or major, and you've heard the term before. So that means that a second, for example, can be minor or a major. All the intervals that we talked about in the diagram are major intervals. They're all major intervals. There's no minor in there. So how do you make a minor, something major, minor? How do you make a major problem a minor problem? Yeah, exactly. You make it smaller. So if you have an interval that is major and you want to make it smaller, you can either take the root and rise it, but if you rise the root, then it's not the same interval. The root stays the root, so exactly, you're going to flatten that interval that is major to make it minor. Here's our diagram, and let's consider a major second. So I said that all the intervals are there are major on that diagram. So if you right here we have a root. From the root to the major second, how do you make that major second minor second? You're going to take that second and move it 1 fret lower. Alright, let's take a third. Here's our major third. How do you make that major third minor? You take it and you move it 1 fret lower, and that's a minor third now. Let's take a seventh. How do you make it minor? You take it and you move it 1 fret below, and that's a minor seventh. Okay, notice the B. B for flat. There's two ways in music to call a minor interval. You can either say M or B for flat. So a minor seventh would be, you can list it like minor 7 or flat 7. All intervals can be major or minor. Again, the shape lists only the major intervals. All of them except for the middle ones. And let's take a look at let's go back to our board here. Again, the root can be on any string, any fret, it really doesn't matter, right? Alright, then from there you can go to the next note, which will be another interval. But let me finish this DNA thing. I took art in college. I actually didn't go to college. That's this diagram is extremely important. So here we have the root right there, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and then the octave right here, which is also the root. Same thing. The second can be major or minor, and you know that now. The third could be major or minor. So here we have all the major intervals. I'm sorry, the minor intervals. Here we have all the major intervals. We have major second, minor second, major third, minor third, major sixth, minor sixth, major seventh, minor seventh, and these notes you should be able to find on the fretboard. So I'm going to color these notes. The colored notes are the ones that you should know how to reach now. And if you don't, please ask questions right now. And when you're doing this kind of thing, it's really important not to go over the lines. And yes, you paid for this, for this piece of advice. So the black notes you should be able to fill from now on, right? The diagram that you have lists the major ones. Now what about the fourth and the fifth? Well, there's no major fourth. See, it doesn't fit. Doesn't cross the line. There's no minor fourth. Same for the fifth. So we're gonna have. I kind of lied when I said that the diagram listed all those intervals. And if you look at the diagram, you see the fourth of the diagram. The fourth that I listed is this fourth, the one that's right in the middle. Same for the fifth. It's that one. Right here, these are perfect. The ones in the middle are perfect. We only need these notes now. And then you will know how to play any interval on any string, on any fret of the sixth string. So the one that is perfect can be changed. Two subcategories. A perfect fourth can become something else and can become something else again. It can become these two things. It can't become major or minor, because if it could become minor, it would be on that line, but it can't. What is below minor? We're going to call it diminished. So those are diminished right there. What is above major? Augmented. You should be able from now on to list any given interval from the sixth string. Any major interval, any minor interval, any perfect interval, augmented, diminished. What if we wanted to make diminished fifth? 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth, in order to make a fifth diminished, we go one fret below, right there. That's the diminished fifth. So basically the distance between these two highlighted notes is the diminished fifth. Augmented fifth is one fret higher, right there. Depending on the context, we'll call this augmented fourth or diminished fifth. We'll get into that a lot more, and I think it's the next Sunday or in 2 Sundays we're going to talk about scales. But it's the same, right? Same note, and those are called enharmonics. Enharmonics meaning that it's the same exact note. It sounds exactly the same, but it's called differently because it has a different function depending on the scale that we're playing with. Let's talk about the intervals found on the fifth string. On the fifth string, easy. The diagram is exactly the same as for the first one, but it's just moved to the fifth string. So that means that if we are with that diagram, you can now find any interval, major, minor, perfect, diminished, augmented, from the fifth string. And again, this diagram, you can move it to any fret you want. So it can move to the 3rd fret, for example, and this is how it look like, same diagram. If the guitar is tuned in fourths, in perfect fourths, almost in perfect fourths. But if you don't use a tuner, and you've probably tuned your guitar like this before on the 5th fret, 6th string, 5th fret. Should sound like the open string on the next string. You know that tuning? Doesn't work there. You got to do it on the 4th fret. So that's the problem. Let's now consider a root on the 4th string, 5th fret, and this is a root. Well, our diagram, is it going to change? Yes, because all the shapes that we've been using so far cover 3 strings. Like the first shape happens over 3 sets of strings. Now if we had a root on the 5th string, that shape is going to cover, again, 3 strings, and it's the same exact shape. And so it covers three sets of strings. So if our root is on the 5th string, it's going to cover strings 5, 4, and 3. Now, if our root is found on the 4th string, we still need to, in order to find all the intervals, we're going to cover 3 strings. And in this case, it's going to cover strings 4, string 3, and 2. And you remember, whenever string 2 and 3 are involved in the shape, we're going to have to change the shape because of that problem between strings 2 and 3. So there's a new shape that we're going to have to learn. It's very similar, it starts the same, but that's the new shape. 2 and 3 are involved, the shape is going to change. So if you wanted to figure out an interval that is found from a root on the 4th string, you're going to use that shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you use the same exact shape, it wouldn't work. Cool scale, but that's not the shape that we want. So now, new shape has to be learned. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you just need to learn a new shape, a new reference shape, and then from that reference shape, root, major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7th, and octave. You can deduce all the minor intervals, the diminished intervals, the augmented intervals, and so forth. Okay, now what if we had a root that is on the 3rd string? What would happen there? Are we going to have to learn a new shape? Yes. Why? If this is a root, our diagram is going to cover strings 3, 2, and 1. And that's a problem because remember, whenever strings 2 and 3 are involved, the shape is going to change. So we've got to learn a new shape again. And it's going to be that shape. Here's the new shape. And this shape lists all the major and perfect intervals from the 3rd string. Root, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we want to find a minor 7th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 fret lower, that becomes the minor 7. Distance between this note found on the 3rd string, 5th fret, and this note on the 1st string, 6th fret, minor 7. And last but not least, intervals found on the 2nd string. This is our root. Which shape are we going to use? Well, we only have one more string left, the 1st string. So our shape is not really going to cover all the intervals. We can't go to the octave here. But do we have to change our shape from the very first shape that we had? Again, we used that first shape from the 6th string. We also used that shape, that same exact shape, if we wanted to deal with intervals found on the 5th string. It was the same exact shape. Now if we move this so that our root is on the 2nd string, same shape pretty much, but we can only start that shape. So 2, major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, and the major 6th will be somewhere else. So really there's 3 shapes to learn. So you might be wondering, okay, why did we do all that? What's the point? Well, the point is that when you're dealing with questions such as which scale could I use over this particular chord, the answer lies in intervals. You need to match intervals that are found in the chord to intervals found in the scale. And we're going to get a lot more into that. I think it's next week. I'll see you next week. Until then, until next time, that's what I usually say. Salut.